Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Springtime, it's March. Today is March the 10th. Springtime, getting ready to be in the rainy season. And I apologize for the music in the background. The softball girls is over here practicing. They got their music going. But anyway, getting ready to be the rainy season, and I wanted to talk about some of the baits and tactics for the rainy season and having a lot of runoff. Some of the best fishing times that I've had has been in the spring. Fish up shallow and light rain or even a heavy rain coming down, throwing a spinnerbait or a buzz bait. I have had some really fun days fishing buzz baits and spinner baits on rainy days. Something about those rainy days, it's low pressure and the fish is up shallow. You can tie on a white spinner bait or a white buzz bait or a buzz toad. Black always works good as well. Seems like I've caught more on white. Throwing up around shallow weeds and lay downs and stumps. I've had some really fun days throwing a spinnerbait up in water willow. A lot of our lakes here in northwest Arkansas have water willows, and I've had a blast throwing a spinnerbait up in them water willows and bringing it through there, and them fish will just explode on that thing. And I've had them knock the buzz bait 3 or 4 feet up out of the water, and felt like a freight train hit my spinnerbait. But whenever on a rainy day, and especially if you're getting a lot of rain, the water's rising, those fish is moving up shallower, get in that shallow cover and throw that spinnerbait, buzz bait up in there and work it back out of that cover. Sometimes they want it fast, sometimes they want you burning it, and other times they want you to slowly work it through the grass and the limbs of the lay downs, bump it off of the stumps, and you just have to let the fish tell you how they want it. But it is definitely a good time to be out fishing when it's raining. After it's rained a while and you're starting to get the runoff coming down out of the creeks and stuff, out of the mountains and down the gullies, the hills, you get back in the back of those pockets and coves, and where that water's running in, it's washing in fresh water and washing in the crawdads and worms and all kinds of bugs and stuff that was in those rocks, and around the leaves and stuff that was up in the woods. So have more bait coming in the water, and fresh water, more oxygenated water, and those fish will rush in there and start feeding on all that new bait, and you can catch a lot of fish in a hurry fishing in this kind of situation. You can catch a lot of fish doing that. Me and my partner Scott, we was in the back of a cove on Norfolk, over in Mountain Home, Arkansas, for the Bass Cat tournament, and we was throwing spinner baits. The water came up, and it was still raining. The water was coming up, and we was throwing spinner baits in the buckbrush. And we got back in this little old creek at the back of the cove, and where the water was running in. And Scott fired up there with his spinner bait, and caught one that was a little over 5, and he was fighting it in. And I followed up and threw up in there, and was bringing my spinner bait out, and I caught a twin to his. We both had 2 5-pounders on at the same time. That water was kind of mixing. It was kind of dirty running, stained to dirty running down out of that creek, and it's mixing in that clear water. So we threw up in the dirtier water, and as soon as you came out into where the dirty line was, they hammered it. Both of them hit right there as soon as you started coming in the clean water. They come up there and just hammered them. And we caught a lot of fish that day. While you want to fish those areas while the water's still running in, while it's good fresh water. After it's rained a day or so, the fishing's not as good. The fish kind of move with the mud line or the stain line, and you kind of want to follow that stain line out to wherever it's at in the cove or the back of the pocket. Seems like they stay right there around that area where they can still come out into the clear water to ambush their prey, but they're coming out of the dirty water and coming out into the clear to hit your bait when it comes out of the dirty water. So kind of follow that dirty water out into the lake, out into your cove, and after a day or so of doing that, the fishing slows down. I don't know, not sure if it's because they've stuffed themselves or if it's just the different conditions. I'm not sure why, but they don't hit as well after a day or so of after the rain has started. You want to get there and hit it fairly quick as soon as that water starts rushing in. Catfish and crappie and white bass, they all do the same thing. Oh, back hurts, sorry. There's a small lake near me that has a creek coming in the back of it, and it's just a real shallow flat back there in the back, and you gotta pull your trolling motor up and push your way in sometimes, and sometimes it's high enough you can raise your trolling motor up and raise your big motor and still get back in there with trolling motor. But where that creek comes in, if you get there, when that water first comes up and it just starts flowing in, because usually that little creek doesn't flow. As soon as that starts flowing in there, if you can be in there, you can fill the boat with catfish. And the bass is in there too, because I've went in there before. I fished my way in there before, throwing a chatterbait or throwing a swim jig, and fished my way in there, and the bass is in there just like it too. And I mean, it's just one right after the other. Catfish the same way. It's just like perch fishing. You throw your night crawler out there, let it set for maybe a minute at the most, and your line is taking off, and you've got anywhere from a 2-pound to 8 or 10 pound flat, or not flathead, but channel catfish. 10-4. Anyway, back to where I was at. After been there a day or so, it seems like they slow down. But get there just as soon as that water starts flowing in good and hard, and the fish will be there. I was in there one day. I started throwing a top water, a spook style. It wasn't a Zara spook, but a spook style bait. And I started throwing that thing. I started catching them. And finally I was like, good night, this is crazy. And so I got my phone up and started recording. And after I started recording, I caught a fish on 32 consecutive casts on that topwater. Some was white bass and some was largemouth, but 32 consecutive casts, and I'd caught several before those 32 consecutive casts. So I had at least 40 fish and 40 casts, and I tell you what, that was a blast. But I went back in there the next day and caught a couple, but they wasn't fast and furious like the day the water was coming in. So I went out into the lake and found the mud line, and in that same small lake there's a lot of small standing timber. Most of it's broken off trees, but it's still some smaller standing timber that's still under the water in 6 or 8 feet of water. And I got out there in that where that mud line was, that stain line, and I started throwing a square bill crankbait through that standing timber, and that's where they was at. I started whacking them again. Had a blast that day. But anyway, you want to get there and start fishing. When that water comes in, you can use spinner baits, you can use buzz baits, square bill crankbaits, anything moving. You want to power fish when this is happening. The fish is active and they will hit a fast moving bait, and sometimes a fast moving bait will trigger the reaction strikes from the bigger fish. When you have to follow the stain line out into the lake, sometimes they're not as active, and you want a little slower presentation. You want to slow your spinner bait down. You want to get a bigger bladed buzz bait where you can just work it fast enough to keep it bubbling on top. The square bill is still going to work good, and you just have to throw the square bill up there around the bank on riprap or lay downs or around weed lines or anything like that. And also with rising water and up until the point that it starts falling, go to where you can hit the bank with your bait. I've been in places where the trees is flooded and stuff, and you can fish along the outside edge of those trees. You won't catch squat, but you get your boat back in those trees, and where you can throw your spinner bait, buzz bait all the way to the bank and start bringing it out, and you'll load it up. You'll load the boat doing this. So you want to be able to touch the bank with your bait. You want to be able to throw to the bank. When you're doing this, you're going to want something weedless like a buzz bait or spinner bait or a Texas rig, a Cinco, a fluke. A fluke works very well. But whatever you decide to use, be where you can get to the bank with it. Swim jig, chatterbait, any of those works really well. If you have a lot of buckbrush in the water, you can go up there and flip a True Faith custom bait jig, or you can flip a Texas rig Cinco, a Texas rig craw. You can Texas rig a minnow style bait. It's something that you can flip into that buckbrush and get in there where those fish is at around that buckbrush. If you're whenever you're doing this kind of fishing, doing the power fishing, and you're going to be around a lot of cover, you know, you're going to want 17, 18, 20 pound test line, sometimes 25 pound test line. Over there at North Fork, I've been up in the trees. That lake came up 30 feet one week when we was there for the Bass Cat tournament, and the water was up in the trees and the brush and the greenbriers and blackberry vines. I mean, it was up in all of that. So put on the big line, and you went up there and you threw it up there in the nastiest stuff you could find, and you caught some nice fish. You could average 3 to 4 pound bass sometimes up there, throwing in that real thick cover. We're throwing spinnerbait most of the time. I'm a big spinnerbait person. I love to throw a spinnerbait, and we was catching some big fish. We went up around some campgrounds, picnic tables. We caught fish off of picnic tables. We caught fish from around the where the toilets was. They was around the dumb concrete building where the toilets was at. I mean, we caught fish everywhere. But just be where you can get shallow and power fish until the water has quit rising. When the water quits rising, you're going to want to slow down and start moving out. As that water starts falling, you want to start moving out and start fishing more outside of bushes, and eventually they're going to work their way back to the old shoreline. Even if it's still flooded, those fish is going to move back out to the old shoreline because that water's falling. And that's when you want to slow down, and it's usually a higher pressure situation, and you want to slow down, throw a jig, throw a Texas rig craw, throw a Texas rig creature bait, you know, brush hog, fighting frog, anything like that. But anyway, I'm getting ready to pull up here to get the kiddos. It's going to get loud, and this video's lasted long enough the way it is. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to comment below. Please hit like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys out on the water.